And that track was developed by your...
My father and a fellow by the name of Ray Himes. Ray Himes was kind of behind getting it, getting my dad interested, you know, and he had the property, of course, and the place to do it, and so that's basically how it got started.
Do you know what was the motivation behind Mr. Himes deciding this was a good thing for the community?
I think he raced with his son at Rollerball in Panama. And I think they did fairly well up there, and I think that's the reason he wanted to come down here. And of course they would stop in my dad's bar too, you know, and he knew them that way, and I think the conversation got to, you know, to getting it going. I think it was built by a fellow by the name of Ted Coker. He was into well drilling, and he had a bulldozer, and I believe he's the one that did most of the work for the track. I would say it was about a third, if that. It was small, the turns were tight, and like I say, it was where the flag man started them there. Then you go into the turn and you had to go uphill. Then you come uphill and then across the straightaway, then around the steep turn, and then around again, and I believe it was about a third of a mile. I remember the eating stand. Remember Loretta Himes? Loretta Himes always worked in there. They used to get a pretty good crowd, the early stages of it, I think, because I remember a lot of people. Remember the old water truck that would go down and fill up and try to take care of the dust. But there's always a breeze here because we're at 2,100 feet here. So it was hard to control. 3 or 4 laps and, you know, the dust would come. There were a lot of accidents. You remember this turn over here was real steep, you know, they could, because the track is kind of up and down hill, you know, and they would get speed up going across here and then into that turn, and they would sometimes get too high, and they would say, "There goes another one into the potato field." They'd go off the side of the track. The drivers were kind of my heroes at the time.
Like
you
who?
know, like Keith Lundmark, Chuck Martin, Fred Clark. Some of those fellows were always on top, you know. Art Anderson, he was an excellent friend. I know he was a good friend of my dad's, and I think I remember him as being the flag man, you know. Oh, I remember my brother with his car out here with a motor hanging out of the maple tree out here, and you know, for whatever was wrong with it, I really don't remember, but he was quite interested. Like Roger Sadowski, he still lives here in Frewsburg. I remember him racing. Art Anderson, I remember him. Car number 51, I remember that. Ted Anderson, that was my brother, of course.
What was his number?
He had car number 10.
10? Yeah.
Yep. I think Carol and I were discussing that he won one feature, I think, didn't he? He won one and he fought a shaky front end or something to win it. I mean, we had it was in the newspaper, in the Post-Journal, I believe.
That's how we put in the newspaper,
And fought a shaky front end or something like. He was very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
There was Leo Himes. He was always one of the top guys. A guy by the name of Ray Burkhouse. He won a lot of races. Of course, Keith Lundmark. He was car number 47. I remember that. Chuck Martin, Willie Lundberg. I remember him. A guy by the name of Dave Byrath, and I think they called him Buzzy. Percy Bennett. He was an older gentleman at the time, but boy, he loved to race. I remember that, and I thought, boy, that guy's kind of up in years, but boy, he loves to race. But I remember that. There was a guy by the name of Ted Steppe, Steppe, as I remember it. Blinky Litzinger. I don't know if you ever remember that name.
He's still alive. He'll be there.
Is he? Oh, okay. Dory Larson. He raced a lot. Fred Clark, of course, and his brother Dale. These are some of the ones that I remember. I think Fred Clark won more than his share. Keith Lundmark won a lot of races. And Chuck Martin won a lot of races. When Fred Clark came along with a Chevy 6, he six-cylinder, he seemed to be able to beat a lot of those Ford flatheads. The flathead, the old V8 Ford flatheads, he seemed to be able to have that engine. I think it was only like a 235 cubic inch, I believe, but he could really have that tuned, and that thing would just kind of really, I mean, it never missed a beat. It seemed like he just, I don't know, where the Ford flatheads, it seemed like they always had trouble keeping them running right. Missing or something, you know, or, but it was interesting. I do remember when one time that they had a driver's meeting. It was before the season started, and you know, a lot of guys showed up. I mean, the place was packed. I mean, it's not big anyway, but the place was packed, and they were discussing when the season was going to start, some of the rules, the regulations, what was going to happen. All of a sudden, I don't know, somebody said something to somebody, and the place erupted in a brawl. It was a regular brawl in there. The tables were flying, chairs were flying, guys were swinging. I remember who was part of it was the Ellis boys from Leon. Junior, maybe. I don't know if it was Junior, but I knew some of those fellows. And they were in it, and I think it was a fellow by the name of Carl Pentagro from Jamestown. It wasn't pretty.
This was all at the bar.
This was at the bar, and this was just a nice little driver's meeting, before. But of course, you could have a beer, and but I do remember that because I got out of there. I got out of the way. I mean, the guys, I don't think they were racing for a lot of money. It was the race itself, even, if they could get in a car and put some roll bars in it, something they could talk about maybe down to the bar, or...
Now the bar you talk about, is that Anderson's Tavern?
Yeah, yeah.